City, Detroit, Michigan. This is Conversations with Lavish. It's time for us all to come together. Young, old, and everyone in between. Lavish talks about business, news, politics, networking, and anything else that's going on in the world. Find us on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter at Lavish Towing, and on YouTube at Lavish T. Williams. This is Lavish T. Williams.
Good afternoon, everybody. Today on the show, I got Ralph Godbee on the show. Everybody give a warm round of applause to Ralph Godbee.
My man.
What's going on, Ralph, man? Glad to have you on the show.
Man, I'm honored to be here, bro. I done seen your lineup, man. You doing the thing.
Oh, man, thanks. I'm trying to get out here.
Just lucky to be counted in the number. Old has-been chief of police.
Hey, man, it's all good. You still relevant. You still relevant. So we got a list of things that we're going to get down here and we're going to talk about, man. We're going to talk about some things with you. First off, joining the Detroit Police Department. How long ago was that? When did you join the Detroit Police Department?
May 18th, 1987. I was 19 years old and ended up being class president. I was top academic, top shooter. I was chosen to recite the Law Enforcement Code of Ethics. And one of my good friends, Mark Young, we were in the academy together, class 87R. And he told me I was going to be chief one day, and I laughed. And then 2 years later, I ended up chief of police of the Detroit Police Department at 42 years old.
Now, were you ever in your mind, did you ever think that you would be the police as you were going up the ranks?
Yeah, I did eventually once I got into it. Because a lot of people, they grow up, I want to be the police. That was never an aspiration of mine at all. I tell people this, and they think it's funny. I ended up being chief. I ended up applying for the police department on a drunk bet.
Okay.
Me and a good friend of mine, Bobby Gord, my high school classmate. We were at Wayne State University, 18 years old. We were enrolled in school. We didn't go to class much. One night we hanging out. I had a house because my dad said 2 grown men can't live in this house no more. So he put me out, but he had a property. He let me stay in.
Oh, so that's cool.
Yeah. Oh, well, yeah. It was all right.
You had a lot of fun, I'm sure.
Man, way too much. That's how I ended up being a cop. But we went out one night, just hanging out, talking, drinking. Miami Vice was big at the time on TV. So we were just thinking about being cops for all the wrong reasons. We can go to clubs and badge in. We got stopped by the police. We got badges. 18, we can carry a gun. I mean, just all the wrong reasons.
Yeah, all the wrong reasons.
It wasn't about protecting and serving, none of those things. But, they say if you want to amuse God, you tell him your plan. Once I got in there, found out what I was doing, I got excited about it. I thought I could contribute to my community, and turned out to be a tremendous career for me. Chief of police in Detroit. Then I got an opportunity to be chief of police for 2 years. Detroit Public Schools Community District. And, it's been a tremendous career. I mean, I've been all over the world, considered a subject matter expert. I couldn't be more blessed. If you wrote the script and told somebody this was a movie, Hollywood wouldn't even buy it because they wouldn't think it was real.
All right, well, that's cool. Well, I want to talk about you being the chief of police in Detroit.
Yes, sir.
When you became the chief of police in Detroit, what was your reasons and purpose for closing the Detroit police stations down at a certain time? What was the reason behind that?
Well, it's what we were doing. Number one, people like to revise history, and they forget at the time when I got Detroit Police Department, we were on the verge of bankruptcy. We were at the verge of laying cops off, 10% pay cuts across the board, retirements got changed, and the city was engaged in a consent judgment with the state of Michigan reporting to a financial manager. So I had to figure out how to make sure that people were serviced. And then you got people that really don't know what they're talking about. The buildings were never closed. But if you had a police report to make, which there's a telephone crime reporting unit. So if it's a non-emergency, and if I'm gonna have somebody sitting at a desk taking reports, or a police officer out in the field, which one would you take precedence if you got a choice? A police officer in the field. So, and then it was just after there was a shooting at the 6th precinct where a man came in with a shotgun and started blasting my officers. And unfortunately, but fortunately for us, they returned fire, killed him because it was a suicide by cop. Right. And I had all these officers shot up. So now the union is trying to figure out how do we secure our officers. So you get a lot of people that have never sat in a seat that come in behind you, and then their vision is 20/20. But unless you sat in that seat, you have no idea what a person has to contemplate to make sure that you cover 140 square miles with a police department that's dwindling, but the crime issue is not going down the same amount as the number of officers you have to deploy.
Right, I agree. Now, at this time, when the stations was closing down.
But let me say this, though. If you check the record, my years as chief, we had declines in crime every year. And we came into compliance at 90% with 2 federal consent judgments. Because what people also don't realize is that I had to lead the police department with the federal government and a monitor, as well as reporting to the district court about our progress towards constitutional policing. When I took over Detroit Police Department, just before that, when Warren Evans was chief and I came back to be assistant chief under him, my responsibility was to bring the department into compliance with 2 federal consent judgments, one for abuses and patterns and practice of violating citizens' civil rights. And the other one was for conditions of confinement in our lockups, which were horrendous. When I took over that position as assistant chief to run that department and to bring us into compliance, the initial assessment, we were in 19% compliance. When I took over and when I left as chief in October of 2012, we were at 90% compliance. I love Chief Craig. I think he was a great chief.
Yeah, I was going to ask you about him too.
I love the interim chief, Chief White,
right,
was appointed. But Chief White was one of my lieutenants, and I'm the one that drove that bus. And you can go back to the reports from the court, those that were published. It's widely known that the difference in the Detroit Police Department being a constitutional police department and what it was Ralph Lloyd Godbee Jr.
That's what it was. Okay. This is what I want to ask, because I got a little list. At this particular time, police stations, they're closed at a certain time. You got officers.
Let me say that again. They weren't closed.
Okay, they was restricted to a degree.
Restricted. You had to buzz in.
Okay.
So you go to any police department in the suburbs, you got to buzz in now after hours.
That's
you can't
true.
just walk in. So again, people take a piece of information and run with it. So, but
they wasn't closed. They were open.
Yes.
You just had to get buzzed.
You had to get buzzed in and screened. So we didn't have another person walk in with a shotgun and be a copycat and start firing at my officers.
Now, what about officers working 12-hour shifts?
Yes.
12-hour shifts. A lot of officers spoke on at that particular time, the morale in the department was low because they wasn't getting a lot of rest. They were overworked. It was more stress created on the officers.
That was the union's position. That wasn't.
That wasn't yours. Okay. I mean, I want you to correct me. I want you to correct me.
It's not a
if
matter
I'm
of
wrong.
correcting you, but a number of departments in the United States of America run 12-hour shifts. You only work 14 days a month, and your off days are fixed, and you're off every other weekend. So there were quite a few officers that were pleased with that schedule because they can work secondary employment in uniform, which I brought to the table and negotiated the deal for that. Because before I took over that process, Detroit police officers did not have secondary employment uniform.
Okay.
So now they have secondary employment uniform. So I love these questions because then I get a chance to set the record straight.
Correct. And that's what it's about, because I'm speaking from other officers.
Right.
I'm not an officer. You know, they say citizens suffered with response times due to officers overworking themselves in responding to calls. It was times where they didn't have enough officers on the street because they were overworked
now.
and calling off at that particular time.
It's not true.
That's not true. That's not accurate.
It's not accurate.
Okay.
Because I really, one thing about me, number one, I do my homework. Number two, I keep statistics.
Okay.
So
I want to hear them.
So every statistical measure you can talk about relative to policing, we measured everything.
All right.
Including sick days. As a matter of fact, it was projected that there would be blue flus and all these kind of things. Never happened.
Never happened?
Never happened.
Never happened. Okay.
And then also how you measure response time. And this is the thing that, people need to be apprised of. In the department I was raised in, the way you measure response time is from the time you call 911 until a police officer shows up. In some iterations of response time, people measure response time at the time that the run is dispatched and then when the officer arrives. But for the citizen, that's not really accurate, because from the citizen standpoint, response time is based on the time I call 911 and the time an officer pulls up to my door.
Right.
So that's the difference in how we count. So we may count different, but the reality is that those things are well overstated.
Okay. I'm glad you're making that statement, because I don't want to.
Well, a lot of times people don't know what to ask.
Right. And I don't want to sit here and be misinformed.
Yeah.
I don't want to speak off of speculation.
Mm-hmm.
You're the source.
Yeah.
So I can ask you.
Oh, you can
Because
ask.
you can tell me what it is from
Right.
your perspective, because
Well,
you
it's
are in
not my
those
perspective.
shoes.
It's not my perspective. It's facts.
Okay.
Because from my perspective, that's subjective. Facts are objective. They are based on statistics and numbers and measures. So those are easily verifiable. You can check the police reports. You can check the response times. All those things are verifiable through FOIA, Freedom of Information Act. So all those things are easily verifiable. But you'll get anecdotal information from people. Some people were happy with me. Some people wasn't.
Yeah, you get it mixed. I mean, I get a lot of I got a lot of East Side people.
Mm-hmm. I'm born and raised on the East Side.
They didn't speak. They say, you know what? I don't have a problem with Ralph.
Mm-hmm.
To me, he was cool, and he lived in the hood.
Yeah.
And I guess that was big for some of those people that's over there, because they felt like, hey, he lives somewhere off, on the East Side. I don't want to say where.
I don't
they
live
told
there
me.
no more, so it don't matter.
Okay. They say, well, he lived off Kelly, man. He was there, man. He was like, I liked him because he felt like he was real. I was in touch with him. I ain't never had a problem with him. It was a time where I was supposed to be suspended, and I kicked it with him, and he understood, and everything was good. So I don't have a problem with him. I talked to other officers, and they say I didn't get a chance to really know him while he was a police officer, but afterwards, we came in contact. He helped me out a lot with the PAL.
Yeah.
PAL,
Yeah.
you were very insightful, had a lot of information. You're very knowledgeable. So I guess
I'm a
it just
product of PAL.
okay. You are
Yeah. East Side Cowboys.
football.
All
All
Quarterback.
right. That's did you play in high school?
Played high school. Played 3 years at Cass Tech quarterback.
Oh, that's cool, man. That's cool. So I guess, when it comes down to Ralph, I mean, it's people in general. You're going to have some that like you, some that don't, some that it doesn't
You
matter.
know what they say? 1 week they like you, next week you don't. Both weeks I get paid.
That's cool. So overall, you being a chief, how would you rate yourself? How would you grade yourself?
I grade myself as an A.
That's what's up. If you don't, nobody else will.
Well, but it's factual, because again, when I took over the police department, it had been under 2 federal consent judgments for 7 years, and the highest compliance rating it got was 19%. When I left, it was 90%. I mean, 90% in any class you take in America is an A. Your measure, which is unfair, because FBI crime statistics are not supposed to be for comparison purposes. However, if you take a measure, we dropped out of the top 5 in violent crime. Until Chief Craig came, I had the lowest homicide number at 318 that we had in over 20 or 30 years. So, I mean, the numbers speak for themselves.
What was the highest you seen?
Oh, the highest I seen
In Detroit.
Well, people you got to give it context. In the 80s, they were 700-800 had topped at homicides. So 400, 450 in my career. Those were some of the numbers that had lingered around. 308 was the lowest I was able to oversee. So, the numbers don't lie. Men lie, women lie, numbers don't lie.
No, they don't lie. All right, so fast forward. You resign.
I retired.
Retired.
25 years, 6-figure pension. I retired. So let's get that right.
6-figure? Man, come on. Let me
So
get along. Let me get along.
Well, because I think that's important to give context because, as an African-American male, I'm a king. And as a king, you don't ever let anybody tear down your legacy based on their story. So I left and I chose to leave. I wasn't fired. I wasn't asked to leave. I got involved into an extramarital affair when I was in the midst of a divorce, and it was exposed publicly. And I felt that it was appropriate for me to be a leader of men and women, that I should not have to work my personal problems out in the public. So I went to Mayor Dave Bing and I said, sir, I'm done because this is not fair to the department. So to me, integrity is not that you fall, but it's what you do after you fall. Only thing that I will say, and then I'll be done on this part of the conversation because I'm not going to talk anymore about my personal life.
Right on.
But the only reason mine was exposed is because I achieved something in life. So there are people that have affairs every day. There are people that's having affairs right now as they watch this. So the reason why mine was exposed because I held a high position, the highest position. As a matter of fact, the week I stepped down, the Detroit News had just done a poll of the most trusted and respected leaders in the city of Detroit. I was number one, above city council, above the mayor, that I worked for very proudly. So, there was somebody that commented on your page when you invited me on, said, why do people still want to talk to this has-been? He shamed the church, he shamed the city. And the reason why people want to talk to me is because I'm transparent. I have not forgot where God has brought me from. We're all sinners saved by God's grace. So I use my experience. Number one, nobody will ever be able to tell me something or tell you something about me that I haven't already told myself. I'm a PTSD survivor, depression. My life was in the tank. But what people don't know is that I had lost a child in 2003.
Oh, wow. Yeah, no, I never knew that.
Yeah, no, see, that's the thing.
Yeah.
People always got an opinion on your life.
But they don't know what you go through.
So so I always tell people, don't hate on my glory until you understand my story. So if you don't know what I've been through, people didn't realize that I had two parents. My mother was with multiple sclerosis, and my father was paralyzed from a major stroke. And I was their primary caregiver and chief of police and pastoring a church at the same time. Okay. So I will never let anybody be dismissive of my accomplishments over one set of bad circumstances in my life. So the reason why I continue to do what I do and people seek my counsel is because I know what the hell I'm talking about.
By experience.
By experience.
By experience.
But not only by experience, by application. I've done this at the highest level. At 42, when I became chief, that's the youngest that's ever happened in Detroit Police Department history. 150-year history, I was the youngest to ever do it.
Okay.
At 26, I was running mayor security for Dennis Archer. By the time I was 35, I was a lieutenant. No, actually 30. By the time I turned 30, I was a lieutenant running recruiting and hired, oh my goodness, hired over 1,200 folks, 60% of which were African-American, because when Benny Napoleon, God rest his soul, one of my mentors, when he was chief and appointed me over that position, he said, look, Ralph, I don't know what's going over there, but they claim they can't find black people to hire. And I just can't accept that. And when I went over there and I changed the standard operating procedures of how people are hired in Detroit Police Department, they were looking at people's credit scores and disqualifying people for their credit scores.
So they didn't even have a chance.
So if you have any appreciation for what it's like to be black in America, we the last hired and the first fired. So my credit rating will take a hit because I got fired. I got laid off because there was lack of work, lack of employment. So we changed the standard. So if a person had an issue with their credit, I sent them to credit counseling, and I made that available to them. And then once they set up a payment plan and restructured their debt, I hired them. Some of those folks are now assistant chiefs, deputy chiefs, commanders. So that's why, for the guy that was asking why they want to talk to this guy still, because the Detroit Police Department has my blood running all through it. I spent my life, committed to that from 19 years old until I left at 44. That's what I did. I served this community. And I wasn't one that sat behind a desk. But when I got promoted to commander and sent to the 9th Precinct, the second day I was there, my officers were under fire. And I went out there. And while the gunshots were still going, and I was out there with my gun pulled, just like the rest of my troops. So those are the things that, and my father, I never will forget, because when I got interviewed on the news about the shootout, my father, he called me. He said, man, what the hell are you doing? He said, I didn't pray you off the streets to be an executive for you to go out there. I said, Dad, I can't ask somebody to do something that I'm not willing to do myself. So you're speaking as a father that doesn't want to lose a son, but I'm asking men and women to risk their lives every day. And if I'm too good to go out with them on patrol, then it's something wrong. I don't deserve leadership. So that was, you can talk to anybody who's known me during my career. One thing they'll tell you if they actually know me. See, it's a lot of people that know my name, but they don't know me.
Right on.
If they actually know me, they'll tell you, Ralph Godbee ain't changed from day one. I'm the same guy from the east side of Detroit that in Coney Gardens, went to Atkinson Elementary School, went to Law Middle School, went to Renaissance, went to Cass, ended up going to Henry Ford because I got kicked out my senior year for fighting. So I mean, I'm with it.
Hey man, with it, man. I hear you.
But I tell that story because it's so many young black men that we try to marginalize and make them think that they're not worth anything. And then when people make mistakes, we want to discard, and particularly in the black community, we harder on ourselves and other people. So, all these Negroes out here that got an opinion about my life, I tell you now, God is good to me. And so I don't walk with my head down. I have nothing to be ashamed of. I made my peace with Christ. He is my Lord and Savior. So ain't none of you got a hell to put me in or heaven to put me in. So it's better to please God than to please man. And that's what my life is about, serving people.
Oh, man, I love it. I love it. I love it, man. You said a mouthful. You said a mouthful. So as you progressed, how much of the past actually comes back in your face? Because I want to speak on how people, when they do change, it's like, hey.
Well, but let me stop you there. I didn't change.
You grew.
I made a mistake. I grew.
You grew. So when you grow, you grow into a better person.
Yeah.
A better man, a bigger man. How, for you in your position and being all over the media and everything, how often is it thrown back up in your face?
Oh, I mean, people.
Is it often, or it's not really talked about?
I mean, not really. It's not really talked about.
Or is it talked about by people that just don't have anything to talk about?
I think that's a part of it. People are messy. That's who they are sometimes. But I don't take that into my spirit because, the work is too massive. I'm blessed to be, I've been a pastor. Now I serve at the greatest church on this side of heaven, Triumph Church, where my pastor is Solomon W. Kenlock Jr. I'm the chief of staff at Triumph Church, and every day I wake up working with my pastor on how we're going to make this community better for black and brown people.
Beautiful, beautiful. Now, how long have you been in the ministry?
Since I preached my first sermon in January of 2000. So I'm in my 21st year of ministry. And I made mistakes during ministry. And a lot of times people, they place a burden on preachers that is unfair. Now, should we carry ourselves better? Absolutely. But if you just were to really read your Bible and look at the people that God uses, they're all flawed. Abram, he lied and said his wife was his cousin, and then got his wife caught up into an adulterous affair with and brought a plague upon a community. even to the extent where the king is like, man, why would you even lie to me and put me in this position? Yet Abraham is the father of faith. David, the greatest king that Israel ever seen. He slept with Bathsheba, got her pregnant, then killed, had a husband killed. I mean, that's some pretty wicked stuff.
I agree.
But the thing is, that's what God's grace is about. If I was perfect, I wouldn't need a savior. So, I wake up every day. I make it a point to pray and try to honor God with the works that I can do. But we're not saved by works. Saved by grace through faith, not of works, lest any man should boast. So I have nothing to boast in. I'm saved by the grace of God. I'm blood washed by the blood of Jesus. So for people that want to hold that against me, all I say is this: only a fool trips over what's behind them.
Correct.
I can't change what's behind me.
Can't
what
change
I can
it.
do
is move forward.
And every day God gives me an opportunity, do those things that, fit within, what would Jesus do? He would feed the sick. He would take in those that are outdoors. He would visit those in jail. That's another thing. When I was chief of police, what people don't realize, I went to Jackson Prison and I talked to people that were incarcerated because I want them to know that they, had a place in this city when they were released from, as returning citizens.
Okay.
So those are the kind of things that's why I have street cred. I'm the only, no, I'm gonna tell you, at Muhammad's Mosque #1 on Wyoming, when I was a deputy chief, they allowed me to come in full uniform to talk to the brothers and sisters. And we talked about how we were gonna keep our community safe. And they didn't even ask me to remove my weapon. Now, if you know anything about the Muslim faith and the Nation of Islam, that is unheard of. But I was blessed to be able to work with the great men and women of FOI and the Muhammad's Mosque #1, and we did great things to protect our community. So when you do those kind of things and you're not ashamed of who you are, because I tell people I'm a black man that happened to be a cop, not a cop that happened to be a black man. So my commitment is to black people first.
That's what's up, man. Before we get it, because I don't want to get too far off, I want to talk about the religious side of you, the pastoral side, the ministry. Is there a higher standard for you versus anybody else? Because as a human, we're all men. Yep. But once you put that title in front of you, society puts you in a whole different box, as if you can't live and be human like everybody else.
Well, that's a part of the growth process, the maturity process. So because of my, fall as chief of police and my personal failure, I had to really take an inventory. So I got counseling, dealt with some addiction issues, got over those, dealt with depression. So I'm not ashamed to talk about mental health helps because, after 25 years of dead bodies and just the most horrific side of
it takes a toll on you. It takes a toll on you.
And it did me. And my breaking point was when I lost a child, and I never grieved it appropriately. So I got off into alcohol, and then if you know the story of how I lost my child, my son was stillborn at 7 months in my master bedroom, and I watched my ex-wife almost hemorrhage to death.
Wow.
And she grieved it and I didn't. What I didn't know at the time, 50% of couples that lose a child end up in divorce.
Yeah, I never knew that either.
Yeah.
I never knew that. And I never had a reason to look into it, but I didn't know that.
So let me say this, because I think it's important, because this is why I share my story. Cheryl Brady said this, and I will live by it the rest of my life. My mistakes cost me so much. Why should you have to pay the same price? That's the importance of transparency in ministry. To me, ministry ain't what you do in a pulpit. It's how you show people how to recover from what God brought you through. Being an ex-addict, being divorced, rising to the top, and then having that sacrifice because with the position I held, there were different expectations. So to your point about a minister and the expectations, yes, you should expect better, and you should expect a high standard. So the Bible says, to whom much is given, much is required. So a lot of times we pray for positions. God appoints, God anoints, but it's up to you to be prepared. So I was thrust into leadership as the chief of police really sooner than I expected, because when I was assistant chief, in my second stint as assistant chief, because I had left and retired Ella Bully Cummings retired because I was her assistant chief. Ayanna Stanley Jones, when she was murdered by the police, when we did a raid to get her father after her father killed Jerry and Blake 2 days earlier. That no-knock raid with a flashbang. I was assistant chief at the time. The chief was out of town, which he was entitled to his vacation.
Right.
And I was in charge while he was gone. But there were some things that came out the mayor Bing wasn't pleased about, and he replaced the chief with me. So I was thrust into leadership at a point where it was probably too early for me because I still had not dealt with my own issues. However, I did the thing while I was there. But when you're not healthy, when you're not whole, when you're not healed,
you don't have your 100%
you don't have
in there.
100%.
It's a lot of distractions. It's a lot of distractions out there that you might not even realize because your focus is not 100%.
Well, my focus is 100% when I was at work.
At work, but not overall.
And this is the parallel I need to draw.
Okay.
After losing my son in my master bedroom, being there to, clean the carpet and to watch blood come up through that carpet cleaner. I got to a point where I couldn't go home anymore. I couldn't sleep in that bedroom. So I would find myself at different women's houses drunk and then, in sexual relationships when all of it was trauma that I had not dealt with. And my addiction became, alcohol and women to escape the reality that my child died. All my hopes and dreams were pinned on having a son. And when he died, my life changed significantly.
Right. So with that trauma, and I don't want to recap, I don't want to relive.
Man, it's the best therapy. No. See, that's the thing about trauma. If you don't talk about it, if you don't heal, if you don't get help, that's the ability to heal from it, is to be able to talk about it, is to be able to share experientially what you went through, because somebody else might be going through the same thing.
They might. And
they don't even understand. I didn't even know I was going through low-grade depression. I didn't know, I was having a PTSD. I didn't know those things while I was in it. And I didn't have anybody, because when you chief of police, everybody worked for you.
Everybody worked for you. You're the one that everybody
looks to.
So when you were going through your trauma with the loss, you were going through your alcohol problem. You were going with your with the women problem. When you were out here dealing with these women in the department, and you're top of the food chain.
Oh yeah.
You're up here, so you got females out there clout chasing. They want to get close to you, but then they have dirty motives.
Well, I wouldn't even see. Now that's where I wouldn't go from this standpoint. I'm a grown man, and I have to be accountable for. I don't care what's thrown at you.
Okay,
it's your choice whether you fall prey to that or not. So I would not blame the women at all. I was the one at fault because I held the power dynamic, whether they were police or not. When you have a position of authority, one that's looked up to, they can throw what they want. Now, if you decide to catch it, then, for every action, there's a consequence. So the consequences were, if it had stayed a secret or nobody told, the reality is God still knew. So
well, how was this is what I want to ask, though. We talking about, adultery.
Yeah.
You're messing with this girl. She's aware, you're aware, y'all both know what's going on. I'm not saying that it's right, but it's an agreement that you both have. One person gets upset, one person gets mad. However the case went, a person had a vendetta and said, hey, I'm going to expose this guy. I'm going to put it out there. If y'all already knew what was going on, it wasn't, hey, I'm going to say it because of X, Y, Z. It was more, I'm going to say it because I want to destroy you. I want you to feel this. I'm not saying that I don't know what the other party was thinking, but for someone to publicly know, hey, we're both wrong at what we're doing.
Well, but again, I can only hold myself accountable for my behavior. And the thing is, and this is why I talk to young black men, I mentor, because number one, we don't get the same second chances as our counterparts in the white community.
We don't.
I mean, Donald Trump, because look at this. If Donald Trump had been a black president with 3 baby mamas and 5 kids, I mean, and the allegations against him, he never would have. I mean, Barack Obama, from a character standpoint, regardless of whether you Republican or Democrat, whatever you believe your political leanings are, this man is an impeccable father. He's an impeccable husband. Do you think as a black man as president, if he had any hint of an affair or scandal on him, that wouldn't be exposed?
Oh, it'd be exposed.
So-
It'd be talked about. It'd
right.
be in history. We gotta get this guy out of office.
So
He's
my
horrible.
So my point is this: when I talk to black men, I try to show them the error of my ways. Not that, because people say, well, it's not fair. Other people have had affairs and they still make it. That's not the point.
Okay.
The point is, number one, I'm held to a standard that I'm accountable for. And if I mess up, then I got to fess up.
All right.
And I got to own it. So I don't blame the women. I don't blame what was thrown at me. I don't go by, well, women love a man in uniform. No, it was my responsibility to be responsible for me. Now, again, I had filed for divorce, but they just threw that in at the end, So it's a lot of stuff that, it was sensationalized from a media standpoint. But, to get back to the fundamental premise is I talk to young black men and let them know, number one, we don't get the same second chances. So when you reach those levels, understand that to whom much is given, much is required. And if we're not judged on the same standard, and we know that, then I have an obligation to mentor and talk to and warn. I mean, I use my life as a sermon. A lot of times the sermons that you preach from a pulpit, they don't resonate with people. But the sermon that you live, the experiences that you share, that's what makes, people want to hear what you got to say.
Right. I'd rather hear your life story
Then, because
I'd rather hear you tell me something, Lavish. I've been in these shoes before. I've been in this situation,
Right.
man. Take my advice. Take it from me, somebody that's been there. Don't do this.
So when you win your election, I'm telling you now, Doc, it's a lot that comes with that.
It is.
So
I want to, because I want to go into some more police stuff, but I want to take this. I want to take a small moment to have everybody that's watching see that I'm running for police commissioner. November 2nd is the election. One of the major focuses that I'm focusing on is police accountability, holding police officers accountable for the jobs and the duties that they do, involving the citizens of Detroit, the residents of Detroit. So I'm not asking for your money, at least not yet. But what you can do if you're on Facebook is go to my page and share my Vote for T. Williams postings out to share the word, to let everybody know, hey, I'm running for this office and you can vote for me. And you can check out my website, lavishtwilliams.com, and you can read any and everything on there about me and my vision for police commissioner. All right. I wanted to get that out the way. So moving along, we're going to talk about policing now.
Mm-hmm.
We're going to talk about defunding the police. How do you feel about that?
I support it.
What's your take and why?
I support it. And the reason why I support it is because, a lot of times we get caught up in my chief of police is the bomb.com, so we don't have no problems because our chief is good. But I'm looking at things from a 30,000-foot point of view now. And, Detroit has been blessed to have community-oriented chiefs, regardless of whether you like them or not. I think if you're really honest, our chiefs have been in touch with the community and have been community-oriented. But the reality is there's 18,000 police departments in the United States of America, and one chief can't change systemic racism. One chief cannot change structural racism. The criminal justice system is completely broke, and it was never designed for black and brown people. So regardless of how noble you are when you join the profession, and you can have the best intentions, structurally, policing is designed to keep the foot on the neck of black and brown people. So if you look at George Floyd, and everybody, is like, is Derek Chauvin going to be convicted? Yeah, he was. So now we got Ronald Green. A trending hashtag was beaten to death by Louisiana state troopers. Ma'Khia Bryant in Columbus, Ohio, shot to death by the police. Dante Wright, quote unquote, mistaking taser for a gun, shot to death. So if you keep doing the same thing the same way and expect a different result, that's the definition of insanity. So when you talk about defunding the police, what I'm saying is that you had to know the history of the police and the foundation of policing in the United States of America. The first organized police departments in the United States were slave patrols, and their job was to control black and brown people because they were property. They were property. Let's get that correct. They were property, and they controlled them through fear, violence, and intimidation. So if you really look at what policing is now, so you go from slave patrols, to the Emancipation Proclamation, and then you go to Reconstruction. For a period of time, black people started to ascend a little bit in the South. But then you got Jim Crow. And police have been the instrumentation of, en masse. Don't get so, attached to your police department and you love your chief and you love your city. That's fine. But you can't just exist inside the boundaries of Detroit. So now, if you really are honest, if we just really take a deep breath and think about it, what's the difference between the slave patrols and now? Because black people are still being controlled and over-policed through fear, violence, and intimidation. So I would suggest that if police were the answer to the crime problem, then and locking up black people was the answer, because black people are over-incarcerated because we're 12% of the population, but we're close to 40 to 45% of the prison population. So if that were the answer, why isn't Detroit safer now? Why is it, that we get excited about 250 homicides as opposed to 300? I mean, that's ludicrous. So we still have not made a dent in the real structural issues that have caused the lives of black and brown people to be less than, from a quality standpoint, that of our counterparts in white communities. So I will ask this question. I dare anybody to really challenge it. If you go out to Grosse Pointe, Royal Oak, West Bloomfield, Birmingham, any of the affluent suburbs around Detroit, I don't feel safe because I see police all over the place. I don't feel safe because I see, people stretched on cars and cars pulled over and red and blue lights. As a matter of fact, they discourage that because that's bad for business. But I feel safe because I see clean streets. I feel safe because I see manicured lawns. I feel safe because I don't see burned out homes where you have stretches of homes that have not been demolished. I don't see grass growing above, the height of a small child. So safety is not, and we got to redefine what public safety is. So I'm really tired of putting Band-Aids on gunshot wounds, thinking that if we fix the police departments, that we fix our communities. No, that is absolutely untrue. We have structural deficits if you don't address the wealth gap, which a white family's wealth is 10 times that of a black person. Social demographers and economic experts have said that it would take 200 to 300 years for black people to make up the wealth gap if circumstances stay the way they are. So when I say defund the police, our governments have no problem defunding anything else in the urban community. They defund mental health because we don't have Lafayette Clinic anymore. John Engler got rid of that.
Sure did.
They defund demolition because unless we get some grants from the federal government, we ain't funding that. So everything that would make a community safe, we defund parks and recreation, we defund education. So we've been defunding stuff in the urban community, but as soon as you talk about defunding the police, and everybody lose their mind, even black folks lose their mind. But they've been defunding you all the time. So if you now invest in mental health facilities to deal with the trauma that black people have gone through,
right,
you invest in wraparound services for kids in school. The $15 to $20 million, and this is one of the reasons why I just couldn't take a check from DPSCD anymore. They don't need police. They need to take that $15 to $20 million and get some more teachers or pay the teachers more. Get those metal detectors out of schools and get some psychologists and psychiatrists in schools, because what these kids have to overcome just to get to school. Some of them, they don't have running water. They don't have heat. They're being made fun of and bullied because they smell bad, but they can't even take a bath. They don't have clean clothes. So we defund everything else. And now, every time, though, when you talk about, we need to increase the budget of the police department, then everybody's, because we need more cops. More cops just mean more Negroes in jail. That's what it means.
All right. So how did we rebuild the police departments?
I don't think it'd be rebuilt. You got to start from scratch.
And what would that
Because
what
that would require is, number one, there have to be national standards that standardize what's acceptable behavior by police and what is not. There have to be national. So there can't be 18,000 different ways to do it. But there has to be one national standard that's agreed upon. That's the best practice for policing. If you look at the United Kingdom, England, they have 42 constabularies. That means they have 42 police departments in their country. We have 18,000. How do you control that? And when the average size of a police department is 25 to 50 officers, Detroit, the major cities, those are outliers. But the reality is that you can, if you get, those big ones to comply, what do you do about the other ones? It's only 55 major cities and major city chiefs of police. That's 55 out of 18,000. So if you really want to make systemic change, there has to be some national intervention relative to standards for use of force, standards for investigating use of force. Because if you look at what just happened in Elizabeth City, where they just murdered Andrew Brown Jr., and when I was chief, we had to develop and enforce a policy that you cannot shoot from nor at a moving vehicle unless there's exigent circumstances, which means that vehicle is coming at you and you have no absolute other choice. These officers just because he was in a car, they emptied clips on that car and murdered that man, and then the district attorney said it was justified. That's why we need to tear this thing down and build it back up.
Yeah, we need to do something about it. I tell you that. So what's the new civil rights law?
That's the issue. We don't have adequate civil rights laws relative to voters, because voter suppression now is, you have, 35 states that have some form of voter suppression laws, and most of them are Republican. All of them are Republican. That's why, and let's just get this off the table now.
All right, let's get it off.
I know it's coming up. I love Chief Craig. I think he was an excellent chief of police. I hate to see him leave the city of Detroit because, to me, I don't see it as a competition like this chief was better than that one. Every iteration should get better and better. You ought to build on the success of the last one. And, Chief Craig, they took over, and got us out of the consent judgments. A lot of things, and if you talk to Rich Baird, who was the chief of staff for Governor Snyder, I wrote the template that they used to hire the next chief of police, because their intent, even through emergency management and bankruptcy, was to keep me as chief. But my personal choices, I decided to step down. So I wrote the blueprint. So, so that's why I know so well, the Detroit Police Department. I haven't been there in 8 years, because I wrote the blueprint. So what we really have to concentrate on now is what is right for Black and brown people, because you can't have two different systems of policing. So the reason why I can't support the Republican Party is because this iteration of the Republican Party, until Donald Trump's hands are off the steering wheel and there's a major commitment to stepping away from white supremacist support, I can't support a Republican. So I don't know what Chief Craig's ultimate goal is if he runs. I think he's an ethical man. I think he's a competent man. I think he is one of the brightest police minds in the United States of America. I just can't support a Republican because I can't support the Republican Party. So that's not any, disdain I have for Chief Craig at all. But that party is actively seeking to suppress votes of black people because they can't win on policy. So if you can't win on policy and you restrict how many people can vote, because there are not enough Republicans in America to win the presidential race if the playing field is level. Because numerically, there are more Democrats and independents in the United States than there are Republicans. So if you have to change the rules to win and you're not the majority of the country and you want to take us back to a voter suppression area, that's a civil rights issue. You don't want to deal with qualified immunity where officers can kill people with impunity. That's a civil rights issue. So that's why I can't support a Republican candidate at this time in my life. If there's a major change in structure, and let me be honest, there's a time in my life I could have been a Republican. Because what people don't realize, black people in general, we're very conservative. Very conservative. We are politically pragmatic. We don't just look and say, oh, that's a black person running. They say, which one can win and which one can, I mean, come on, look, Joe Biden wasn't the most exciting candidate in the world, not the most progressive candidate in the world, but there were, you had Cory Booker in the race. You had Kamala Harris, who became vice president in the race. But what black people looked at is who can get number 45 out of you see what I'm saying? So we're conservative. We're very conservative. And you talk to black people, we respect the police. That's a narrative that is absolutely not true, that black people don't respect the police. We're afraid of them, but we don't disrespect them. So so civil rights to me is something that the Republicans are not interested in. And that's why I have a problem with the Republican Party.
Okay. I mean, well said. That's how you feel.
But let me be clear, because I don't want anybody to mistake what I'm saying. I have the utmost respect for Chief Craig. He did a hell of a job, and I couldn't have wished for a better successor when I stepped down.
I think he did a fine job as well. So these police tricks, let's talk about police tricks in the black community. Mm-hmm. That's here to, I guess, keep us and keep us down.
Yep.
Keep us broke, mm-hmm. financially in debt.
Yep.
If you give us enough tickets, we can't afford to drive.
Yep. Then you can't afford insurance.
We can't afford insurance. We get pulled over. We get our cars impounded, and we go to jail, and that's more money.
And then while they're impounded, it's collecting fees
that you can't get.
That you can't afford.
You can't afford. Talk about that, man. What are some of these police tricks that you speak of?
Well, I did an op-ed piece that was published today in the Michigan Chronicle, and I would encourage people to read it. It's entitled, "Officer, Why Are You Stopping Me?" And what we have to really do is we have to re-engineer. This is why we got to destroy it and break it down. We have to re-engineer traffic enforcement.
Okay.
And number one, we need to develop what's called strict liability laws relative to operating a vehicle. So what that would mean is that Lavish T, whatever vehicle that's registered to you that you own, I don't ticket the person driving the car. I ticket the car. If I ticket the car, the owner is responsible for the safe operation of that vehicle on the road. So unless you're doing something like a moving violation of speeding, reckless driving, drunk driving, the police ain't got no reason to stop you at all. And if it's a civil infraction that is not directly tied to something that is going to put somebody in danger on the road, record the license plate, send the owner of the vehicle the ticket in the mail.
Now, what do you think the reality of that is?
Well,
do you think it can happen where there's no traffic stops?
Let me go at it. No, I'm not saying no traffic stops.
Just petty traffic stops.
Petty traffic stops.
Tail lights out.
Tail lights out.
Because missing brake light,
yes.
License plate light.
Exactly. Because see, things like those are very, very discretionary, number one. And then number two, they're not employed with equity. So if I see a black person in the car, if I go through the Michigan Vehicle Code, I can articulate damn near any reason to stop you.
Oh, his windshield was dirty.
They don't have to make it up because then they can say it's obstructive vision. You got too much snow on there. I mean, just so many things. If you go through the Michigan Vehicle Code, I can find a predicate to stop anybody in America and justify it.
Okay.
So let me get back to my point because I think this is very important. And this is what got me to thinking differently. And you asked me, is it practical? Can it be done? Well, when Leonardo da Vinci started doing drawings of helicopters and mock airplanes and things that could fly, there was no such thing as an airplane. Men couldn't fly. But at a point, the Wright brothers took that and they built upon that idea, that seed that was planted. And now I'll be in North Carolina in, less than an hour tomorrow when it takes me 12 hours to drive there because somebody dared to challenge the conventional thinking. So when I was in Phoenix in 2009 for the All-Star game, I was with Allen Iverson because I was running his security at the time. So I rented a vehicle while I was down there. When I rented that vehicle, by the time I got home, the vehicle was turned in. I had got a ticket in the mail for speeding because they have the traffic enforcement cameras.
All right.
So that camera didn't know whether I was black, didn't know whether I was white, didn't know whether I was whatever. I had no opportunity to, get into a situation where the officer could mistake my cell phone for a gun. They cited the vehicle.
The car.
And since I rented the vehicle, I was responsible for the ticket. So that got me to thinking that why are we doing this? And then check this out. Cops swear up and down that traffic stops are the most dangerous encounter you can have.
I heard that by many.
Okay. So, let's, but again, I go to statistics. If you go to the Bureau of Labor Statistics and find out the top 10 deaths per 100,000 by occupation, police ain't even in the top 10.
What is?
Construction workers, roofers, airplane pilots.
I guess they're not talked about. That's why we don't hear about it.
Yeah. So now, don't get me wrong. The nobility of policing, there's a lot of attention gathered when a police officer is killed in the line of duty because it is an honorable profession. But even within policing, the leading cause of death of police officers is traffic, car chases. So why are we doing car chases for civil infractions when at times we don't even know what we're chasing for? And a lot of times people run because they got chased. So let me finish this point. So that got me to thinking, if that is the most dangerous encounter for a police officer, then there are two constituencies that we're responsible for reducing that possibility. The police officer, because then it's an occupational hazard. And then secondly, the citizen, because their actions can be mistook for something that is a threat to the police officer. And the police officer says what? I feared for my life. I perceived a furtive gesture. I perceived this and that. And it's so funny that they perceive that more on black people than other people.
They
that's
do.
A whole different.
They perceive it a little too often. Too often. I mean,
so if you take
loss of life.
So if you take those variables out, now you have some, because they have automatic license plate readers now.
Right.
So now the technology is there to where if there's a violation that needs to be cited, cite the vehicle, let the person keep going. Because now you reduce because the only way you're going to reduce the excessive force is reduce the over-policing of black and brown people. We have to stop how many times we're touched and talked to and encountered by police. Because number one, if you're that damn scared of a police stop, you stop me. I didn't ask to get stopped. You stop me. So you create your danger and then you articulate your danger that you perceive and kill me. What? That's backwards. If you're that fearful and you're gonna stop me,
get out your car, walk up to my car.
Right. Because you're afraid. So if that's the variable, the only way you get a different outcome in a mathematical equation, you got to change the variables involved. Okay. So if we don't change the variables, all this stuff we're maneuvering around, we're still gonna get the same results as long as, because the FBI has told us about 10 years ago that the white supremacists were infiltrating police. Now, I tend to disagree. White supremacists have always had police. The black folks that are not police, we're the ones that infiltrated it, but we have not stood up for our people in this profession. And we go with this, well, we all bleed blue. Well, no, the hell I don't. Because, no, but let me tell you why. Because you can take that blue uniform off. I can't take my black skin off. So even as a retired chief of police, two chief of police in 2 jurisdictions, still, when I'm driving that orange Camaro SS with 500 horsepower, with tinted windows, I'm getting looked at the same way as any cat in the city of Detroit.
With that LS3 6.2 motor in there.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. So we got to take a lot of that discretion, because officers have not. There was a time where you felt that if an officer said something or wrote something, that it was true. But there's too many verifiable scenarios that that's just not true.
So how often do you think officers are lying on citizens, especially the black and brown?
I wouldn't say lying. I would say abusing their discretion.
Okay.
Because though they may be clearly articulable things that justify the stop, but it's really backing into it. Because the stop is to justify. Then you have to justify the stop. If I say I fear for my life, I can do what's called a Terry stop. So I can do a pat down and frisk, or search the interior of the vehicle to the extent to where they have reach of potentially of a weapon. So I can always articulate why I can pull you out the car. But again, it always happens with black folks. Black folks get pulled out of the car and searched and stretched all the time. That's even in Detroit, and I love my department that I matriculated from. But again, that's why it's systemic, and you got to address the systemic issues, and you can't just go at it from trying to fix it one police department at a time.
You think police brutality exists in Detroit?
Yes, it does.
It's just not talked about.
Well, I wouldn't say it's not talked about. I just think that the culture has improved tremendously, because I fired cops for that stuff. Chief Craig fired cops, and so when you have strong leadership that sets a different tone and culture, then those things start to mitigate, and then you can isolate the bad ones. So again, but that's why I say, Lavish, it's much deeper than your department, because if Detroit got it 100% right, you still got to drive through Warren.
Still got to drive through
Sterling Heights. You got to go through Southfield.
Still got to go through Redford.
Right.
Got to go through.
So the rules of engagement have to be the same for all police departments. And you can't have this level of, this one police department does it this way and this one does it another way, because again, we never get to the bottom line. And then at the end of the day, I don't care how you cut it, it's a black and brown individual that ends up dead. Even with Makira Bryant in Columbus, Ohio, with all they said, she had a knife in this. Kyle Rittenhouse, in a protest with an AR-15 around his neck, killed 2 people in front of cameras and witnesses, shot another one, and walked past the police with the AR-15 still on him, and they gave him a bottle of water.
White privilege.
White privilege. Dylan Roof, verifiable on camera, saw him walk into the church, killed 9 black folks, walk out of the church, smile for the camera. They know exactly who they're looking for. They don't have to fear for their life or guess whether he's dangerous. They know he killed 9 people. But they found a way to bring him into custody.
Alive,
and they took him to Burger King on the way to the lockup because he was hungry.
That's ridiculous.
So miss me with the, we bleed blue, it's not about race. We didn't make it about race. And even though we're the ones that's fighting and advocating, we're not the oppressors. You can't relieve yourself from your own oppression. At some point, people of goodwill of all races got to say, this is broke. This don't work the way it's set up. It does not work. So if Detroit get it 100% right, you still got LA, you still got Chicago, you still got Miami, you still got Cleveland, you still got Columbus, you still got Atlanta. It is just so prevalent that we got to keep pushing the envelope. So that's why I'm convinced I probably won't be a chief of police again. But the rest of the days that God gives me on this earth, I've got to fight to raise the possible, even though people think it's impossible. I may not live to see it, but I'm damn sure going to set the blueprint of how it can be done better.
Well, if you put it out there, it will happen. Let me ask you a question before we wrap this up.
Yes, sir.
For you being a citizen, a civilian now, ex-police officer, looking in, you still a resident of Detroit?
No, I live in Royal Oak, man.
Oh, okay.
Chilling.
Well, we're going to utilize your culture,
Yes.
the environment. For you, what would you like to see the Detroit Board of Police Commissioners do? How active would you like to see them?
I would like to see the Detroit Board of Police Commissioners, because they are really the policy body. You all approve policy, you approve promotions, you oversee the budget, all those things. those pretext stops, those BS stops, through policy, you can decide what discretion your officers can use and cannot use. So I would love to see the board and the Chief White, really roll up their sleeves and decide, okay, we're not going to do these petty things. We can do it, but we're not going to do it. To go to my biblical indoctrination, Paul said this, all things are lawful for me, but all things are not expedient. Just because you can do it doesn't mean you should do it. And black people have to have the freedom to move in and about. And if they're not bothering anybody, they sure shouldn't be bothered by the damn police.
Yeah, well, I know you can't barely stand on your block without having a black car coming down the street, jumping out on you. And nowadays, some of these kids, I won't say all of them, some of them, they're not raised the way that we were.
Right.
And what I mean by that is, I don't want to talk about them, but some of them are square. Yeah. But they look as if they're not. And what I mean by that is their perception. Right. They wear the fancy clothes, they got the designer stuff, and they're in the group.
Most of it is knockoff because I'll be out of Somerset. They don't be out there.
You don't be seeing the stuff they wearing. You don't be seeing it in the store.
Gucci ain't put that one out.
They ain't put that out. Well, you'll see these young guys, and they'll be standing in a group. It might be 4 or 5 of them. You might have some groups that are for bad, but I see a lot of kids when I roll up and I talk to them. They're actually talking about the weirdest things that I never would talk about when I was their age, which is video games and sports. Yeah. But then you got the police that gives them all kinds of grief and problems and stretch them out. And you got the bad guys. They already know when they come to break out. Right. But you take these innocent young people that really don't even know what time it is out in the street, and you have this police. How can we stop that? Or should we stop it? And what I mean by that, are the police doing their job by just, I guess that would be a stop and frisk type of thing.
To a certain extent. I mean, and that's the way you articulate, but the reality is, and this is not a police problem, you got to have recreation. You got to have something for kids to do. If they don't have structure, then it becomes a police problem. And what we really end up doing is criminalizing being poor, criminalizing having lack of resources, because you got a lot of kids raising themselves because the mother got to choose between, okay, you know, I got my 10-year-old watching my 2-year-old, so I can go out and make, you know, less than $15 an hour on 3 jobs. So, you know, we put our parents in such horrible positions. And then when, you know, the president, Biden, tries to address it, you got Republican governors now that's going to shut down the $300 additional money a month to try and force people into jobs. I got a better idea to make people work. Pay them what the hell they worth.
Yeah.
Establish a minimum wage that is really reasonable so people can live. So we put people in poverty. We don't give them the resources to have a structured life, and then we send the police in to correct it.
Correct them. You're right. I mean, I agree with you, man. The police come in, it costs them money. They're not getting paid enough money. Everything in the world nowadays, the cost of living is sky high. Yeah. It's rocketing. Even in Detroit, our inner city, most of the residents that used to be able to afford to live here are barely making it here. Yeah. So
I mean,
it's all crazy.
You know, for instance, you know, I got a nice loft in Royal Oak, and my car insurance, I mean, it went down by 2/3.
Oh, I can imagine.
I mean, that's, but you know, so you got insurance red line. So I make a good living. I'm comfortable, and that's a lot. I can't imagine what, you know, a single parent with 2, 3, 4 kids with trying to insure a car in Detroit.
Most of them can't insure. They can't afford it. I talk to people who have no fault cars on cars over 10 years old.
So if you can't insure it, then you got to make a value decision.
Do I risk getting stopped by the police, getting a ticket and impound?
And it's a misdemeanor now, because no proof of insurance or not insurance used to be a civil infraction. Now it's a misdemeanor. So now I have to make a life decision.
Oh, man.
Do I drive to work, or do I take a chance and be late, depending on the bus or depending on something else, that we don't have adequate mass transportation in the city of Detroit? It's better, but it's still not what it should be. New York, Chicago, with, you know, subways and above ground rail throughout the city infrastructure. We don't have that. We don't have a railway that runs all the way down from Woodward, from downtown all the way to Pontiac.
What we do have is a nice downtown.
Yeah, it's nice.
We got a new downtown.
We got a new downtown, but what about Mac
We
and
got
Bewick?
we got new guests downtown.
Yeah, and it's beautiful. And
We got a queue line downtown.
But what about Mac and Bewick? What about Philadelphia and Linwood?
What about Puritan Avenue?
What about Puritan? What about Finkel?
No developments
Joy
in the
Road.
neighborhoods. But we got downtown.
We got downtown.
We got Midtown.
And I say this, and I gotta run.
Yeah, I know it.
But trickle down economics don't work, whether you are Republican or Democrat. We get mad at nationally Republicans, investing in business and giving them tax breaks. And then when trickle down economics don't trickle down because all they do is sell their stock options and make their stakeholders happy. It ain't much different in big cities. We cut ribbons downtown and with the promise of we're bringing all these jobs.
And none of the jobs get here.
Well, they get here, but
not for us, not for the
that's
residents.
the point. Because then we haven't had adequate job training, adequate job readiness, an adequate pool of resources for people to be able to be prepared for the jobs that are brought. So now you have an influx of people that are not even a part of this community, that they're coming here for the jobs. And then you have a level of gentrification that, a lot of the clubs that you see out in Royal Oak and out in the suburbs now, because that's where all the parties are happening.
Right.
Well, those same club owners, they was downtown when nobody was really downtown.
Right, but now they were pushed away.
But yeah, because culturally we're not acceptable. They don't want
they
that
don't want us
crowd down there.
I mean, you can barely ride motorcycles downtown because
Exactly.
now you got the new residents on Atwater that doesn't want the noise, although they know living downtown
That's
is
what
going
comes
to
with
bring
downtown.
Correct. So yeah, that's a problem.
I mean, if you
we
in
can go
Manhattan-
on and on and on all day about it, but I know you got to go. But
Bro,
you know,
hey, but let me say this before I go, Lavish. I appreciate you, man, for opening your platform. We need more, kings like you. Ask them tough questions, because anybody that, is worth their salt, they should not be in a position of leadership if they can't answer questions, if they can't answer to the people that they're charged with leading. So if you call yourself a leader and you ain't got nobody following you, you just out for a walk.
that's what's up, man. We got Ralph Godbee. Thank you for coming out to the
Appreciate
show.
you, Doc.
And we're going to wrap it up. So everybody tune in for the next one.